out. Okay, let's have a look at the phone numbers. Yep, I'm quite happy. Lorraine, Debbie, you happy to start?
Absolutely.
Excellent. So I wish everyone a first of all welcome and a good evening. Thank you for giving me the privilege of a few opening words. Firstly, and most importantly, we're really delighted to welcome Lorraine, and very much looking forward to hearing about your story, your work, and obviously as a community we celebrate together with you in the achievement of the awards of the MBE, which is something so remarkable, and especially given that it was awarded for services to vulnerable children and families. I mean, what greater honor and act of chesed could there be than that? I'm not going to introduce you further than that, because otherwise Debbie and I will be repeating ourselves. But I do want to take this chance, first of all, to thank, as always, the Education Committee for putting these events together, to express appreciation to Julie Conn and to Michelle Sint in particular for arranging this evening. And thank you to you, Debbie, for agreeing to chair it and run it, and into you, Lorraine. And I think I've said enough, and I will hand over there for you to you, Debbie, and very much looking forward to what I think will be a very interesting and fascinating evening for us all, and one that I'm delighted we're able to come together to hear.
Thank you, Rabbi Zobin, and good evening, everyone, and thank you, Michelle and Julie and the Education Committee, and most of all, thank you, Lorraine, because I'm actually thrilled to be talking to you on the occasion of the award of your MBE. I think that you are someone who definitely deserves to be recognised, and I'm thrilled that you have been. But I didn't know exactly how much you deserved it until we spoke before, and I hope that today, this evening, we are going to enlighten other people as to what you actually do, and a little bit of insight into your work and into some of the events that have really impacted on lots and lots of people. So firstly, I should introduce you and say that, Lorraine, you are a Professor of Clinical Health and Health Psychology at the Institute of Global Health at UCL. You're also partnering with WHO, UNICEF, Oxford University, and UNAIDS. And you are also Avram's wife, and you are also the mother of Ari, Ilan, Yoni, and Leora. You're also a mother-in-law and a grandmother, and an amazing hostess, and a great friend who's always smiling and always really, when she walks into a room, you know that Lorraine is there, because she is an absolute presence. So it's great to be speaking to you, even if it has to be over Zoom. So Lorraine, you were all awarded this MBE for services to vulnerable children and families, as Rabbi Zobin said. And I'd like you just to explain to us what those services were. What is it that was so special about what you are doing?
Well, I do quite a lot. Maybe that was it, just for sheer volume. Keep trying. I work with basically with children and families who are in poverty. Many people who work go for the low-hanging fruit, you know, the quick fixes, you know, feed the hungry, the kind of low-hanging fruit. And I kind of thought, well, what about the high-hanging fruit? Who's there for the difficult problems? Who's there for the hard to reach? So my work is really with people affected by HIV since the beginning of the pandemic. I focus on mental health. I look at pandemics more broadly, and I've done some work on other pandemics, and including COVID. I look at discrimination and gender inequity. I have studies on teenage pregnancy amongst young women who are HIV positive. We have the largest study in the world on that. I look at disability. I've look at abandoned babies, and it's kind of, you can see the theme of the most discarded in society. I've done a lot of work on violence and abuse and suicide and bereavement. So it's not the happy side of life, but I do look a little bit at well-being. I run a few international conferences. I edit some international journals, and that sort of keeps me busy and off the streets.
I'm glad to hear that. I hate to think what you'd be doing if you were on the streets. Fine, I understand that that's where you concentrate your work, but what I want to know is, how did you get to this position? What was it that, how did you get drawn into this field of work?
It's very hard to know. I never had a driving passion. I believe in the philosophy of the waves run onto the beach and you have to just grab the water when it's there. How I got into this field of work is probably the fault of Yoni, my son Yoni, because in a way, he always had bad timing. If anyone knows Yoni, getting up in the morning is a challenge for him. He prefers to be around at 3 in the morning, having not gone to bed. And as usual, bad timing of labor. I went into labor on the day of my final PhD clinical examination, which unfortunately meant I was going to be a little bit late for the examination. And although I was prepared to pitch up, the examiners weren't flexible enough, although I was, to examine me on the day at a time that varied with my allotted time. So the effect of it was that I had to postpone my qualification for a year till the next round of exams. And that particular year was a year when there was a strange new disease around, which was HIV. I was working at St. Mary's Hospital, and I was there, and it was intriguing. And I remember getting the first call from somebody who said, "Help, there's a young man on the ward and he's dying, and we don't know what on earth to say to him, and we don't know what to do. Could somebody please tell us?" And I remember taking the call, and I said, "Well, I have no idea what you should do, but I'll run over and I'll do it with you." And that was one of the first HIV and AIDS patients at St. Mary's many years ago. In fact, it wasn't even called HIV then, it was called HTLV3. So it was in the very early days of the AIDS pandemic.
I remember those times. It was very, very frightening. You know, younger people don't remember it, and they've got COVID. At the time, people were dying, and no one knew the reason for it. And when you were working at St. Mary's with these patients, how was that? How did you have help from the outside? Were people acknowledging what was going on? There's a lot of feeling that these patients deserved to die, and that they weren't. They didn't know if we could catch things from them.
Yeah, it was horrific those days. I remember them well. I remember the day Freddie Mercury died in our hospital. I couldn't get a car parking spot. It was really difficult, but we were inundated with press. I remember press getting dressed up in scrubs to try and sneak onto the wards to see who they could find and take photographs. But I remember some good things. I remember a little girl who had been infected through a blood transfusion during pregnancy, and so both her and her mother were infected by the contaminated blood of the blood transfusion. And Diana came to visit the little girl, and she was quite amazing. The little girl was really struggling, and Diana said to her, "What's the worst thing for you?" And the little girl said she really didn't like it. When they did an endoscope, she had pneumocystis pneumonia, and they had to check her lungs. It's a very unpleasant procedure for a little girl. And Diana said to her, "But didn't they tell you the trick?" And the little girl said, "No." And Diana said, "If you hold the princess's hand, it doesn't hurt." And the little girl said, "But I don't have a princess's hand to hold." And Diana said, "You know, that's very funny because I'm a princess." And from then on, every time the little girl had an endoscope, we were instructed to call Diana, and she'd pitch up. I remember her once pitching up in like gym clothes in a little red car without any fuss or to do, and she would be there for this little girl. So there were some good moments, some very good moments.
That's an incredible story. Oh, amazing. Yeah. Lovely memory of Diana. So I can see from the picture behind you that your work has taken you to many exotic places. Which places have you been to? Where have you been? And have any of them had a lasting impression or left a lasting impression on you?
Well, in sharp contrast to this year, where all I've been to is Hendon, I've traveled quite extensively. A lot of my research is in Africa, some of it in Asia, and of course then you need to report the results. I did some work in China, so for that, you have to speak to the people who make a difference. So Geneva, Washington, where the decision makers are. So traveled very, very far. But what's made an impression, the children really, and the teenagers, their resilience, they teach you humility. We did a study in the hills of Lesotho, where we had people going in to provide basically a parenting intervention to families with children with AIDS in the huts, and we had to send the researchers up, and the only way to get up into the hills was on a donkey, and we had to have an argument with the finance officer about the cost to the grant for donkey rides, and he said, like, we don't have a category for donkey, and we said, well, just put it under air travel, and then he said, well, we need 2 quotes, and we said, well, unfortunately there's only one donkey dude, and he ain't giving no quotes. You pay him whatever he likes, and you're very lucky that he takes you up on the donkey. Did some work in a place called Umtata. I don't know if anyone's heard of Umtata, but Umtata is where Nelson Mandela was born, and they were linked to our hospital, and we were trying to do a project to encourage women to be tested for HIV, because there is an intervention that they can take, but only if we know they're positive, and there's resilience and resistance to such testing. And we were in I suppose you'd call it a hut, which was a clinic in the middle of the hills of Umtata. And the women came to the group. They came to the group mostly because they were given a free sandwich. And I took a research assistant with me, and she said to me, like, how do we tell the difference? Because in the UK, we'd look at maybe something like social class or income, but all these women had walked from their huts to the clinic. And I said, let's check who's got shoes. So if you've done the 10-kilometer hike with shoes, you're obviously better off than those without shoes. That was memorable. I can talk to you of lots of places. The Delhi slum, where the Aga Khan initiative has set up little projects to help the workers have some childcare, because before they would just leave the children and go out to work and leave very young children unattended for the day. And they had to do that because they needed money for food, and they set up this little thing. And the room where they held, I think there was 29 children, was smaller than a box room. I mean, it really was unbelievable. Ethiopia, I've been to some of the orphanages there. I was there as part of a mission from the American National Academy of Science. And the orphanages are horrific. I'm a true believer that children should be in family environments, not in orphanages. One I went to, I don't know if you want to hear the story, was an orphanage where a little girl kept following the head of the orphanage. She was trying to take us around, and she was trying to take us around because we were with this large American group, and she clearly imagined we would give them a lot of money. And I asked about the little girl, and this is a little girl who's lost her family, all her family, and she'd walked with her, the little girl was 8 or 9, and she'd walked with her 4-year-old sister for something like 200 miles to the city. And somebody had found them, and they put her in this orphanage. And I said, well, where's the sister? And they said, no, she's at another orphanage for little, because she's too young. So they'd separated these 2 children, and that's all they had in their life. And this little older girl had looked after her sister, and she hadn't seen her for something like 9 months. And I said, why hasn't she seen her sister? Those children must be grief-stricken. There was a rule, you know, and if it's a rule, you can't see your sister. Anyway, I thought that was unacceptable behavior. I got up and left. I do a lot of getting up and leaving. And I walked out of the room, and no money was given to the orphanage, but I was inspired to do a global analysis of cognitive development and abuse by neglect or abuse by cruel rules for children in orphanages, showing very detrimental effects globally. Well-known data. We don't have orphanages in this country. There's no orphanages in the USA, but they do mushroom, often driven by well-meaning donations, often by religious groups who go off on little trips and have photographs taken outside the Happy Valley Children's Home. And we try and impress on them that that's misguided kindness. And they always tell you that the children love them and hold their hands. And they say to me, what do you call that? And I call that maladaptive child development. And in fact, we were asked to report to the American Senate on that work. And I shared the stage with a very delightful woman called Hillary Clinton with our final report. And she read my report. I was really impressed. And my son-in-law, Michael, tells me that many years later, she was interviewed and somebody said to her, what was the work you were most proud of? And she mentioned the orphan work. Does that answer some of your questions?
Yes, it does, Lorraine. I think very much so. And I should imagine that actually it must be quite difficult for you. You must see things that are very difficult to deal with personally as a mother and wife. How personally do you deal with those sorts of issues?
Well, it's as a researcher and as an academic, it's very easy because you know why you're there and you know what you're doing. But emotionally, it is demanding. I know when I went to do work in St. Petersburg, where they had a large group of orphaned children gathered in a hospital, Avram was really worried that I'd come back with one. And, you know, perhaps I was tempted. But I also get inspired a lot by them. So although it all sounds very negative, there's a lot of positives, and you learn a lot. You know, you come thinking one thing. You know, I went to a children's home in Tanzania, and you know, I had put all like little gifts in my bag, little plastic rubbish. And when I got there, the children were playing this most amazing game with sticks and stones. And I left the other group to go inside, and I sat and played with these kids. And I didn't have the guts to take my silly toys out because their game was like so impressive. I couldn't get the rules, but it made chess look like child's play. And they taught me about doing things well. It was the home where Blood Diamond was filmed. And they had a little classroom where they had all the paraphernalia from Blood Diamond. And when Blood Diamond left, they gave them all beautiful gifts, but the gifts were in glass cabinets. They didn't use them. They gave them shoes and they gave them lovely outfits. But they laughed. They said we would never use something like that because our older girls sew a uniform for the little ones when they come in. So it gives them something to do, and then they get a bond with the little girl whose uniform they sew. And these are like a tunic, and the child wears that for all her years in the school, and that's it. That's her. And we wouldn't use it. And anyway, they gave them shoes, and those shoes would hurt their feet. So they were in a museum, and they made their own toys and they made their own clothes. Humility, you learn a bit of humility.
Absolutely. So let me talk to you now about how do you manage? How do you manage keeping kosher when you go on these trips to these far-flung places? It must be very challenging, I would have thought.
Oh yes. It's fun. I mean, as we all know, it's great fun. I'm an absolute whiz at packing survival food. You can survive on very little. Do you know that? I have an emergency kit. You get lots of protein from nuts. There's the most amazing, the best hechshed food in the world, sealed and packed in unbelievable containers. It's known as bananas and oranges. You peel them and there they are. I take dried fruit. Oh, I'm very good at all of this. And you can't be that fussy. I do remember going to a really desolate place called Kisumu in Kenya. And we were in a hotel and I did check before I left, that said it had air conditioning. I failed to check the verb. Had was the verb. And when I asked about it at the reception, she said, yes, we definitely had air conditioning. That was in 1992. And they hadn't had air conditioning. You could draw on the wall in the insects on the wall. And keeping kosher there was a really good fun. So I bought a box of tomatoes and I had salad for every meal. So much so that even if you go back to Kisumu today, they called me Dr. Tomato. So that was my name. Ari pointed out to me that the British Army rations have a kosher pack. And I don't know how he managed to get hold of them, but he did. So we travel with emergency kosher pack. It's a dry box of I don't know what, and you add boiling water and you get this most amazing kosher meal. It's meaty. I tend not to ever indulge in that if I can. But I do remember sitting a Shabbat in Kaifeng and getting desperate. But you do treat it as a dieting opportunity.
I can imagine. I can imagine. And what about Shabbat? I should think that's as challenging as kashrut.
Well, Shabbat when you're on a project is very interesting. The nice thing in Africa is there's a few hub cities. So Johannesburg is a hub. It's not like Europe where you can fly anywhere. You have to fly either via Addis Ababa or Johannesburg, and Nairobi a little bit. So very often I can organize my tickets so that I can sneak back to Johannesburg for my family. So Shabbat meant all the years I was able to see my family. They were amazingly tolerant. I'd ring them up from who knows where, and I would fly in, jump on the train, and somebody would be waiting for me at the station and whisk me in, often with very little time to spare. And then I'd have normal Shabbat with my family. It was wonderful. Or I was in the middle of nowhere, and the whole issue of is there an Eruv or isn't there one meant I was really stuck in the middle of nowhere without ability to move. There was an interesting ruling that we tried to dig into in a time of, and maybe this is for another time, that if you're the only Jew in town, do you have to have an Eruv? But we'll ask that Shiloh at a separate point. But you do sit. I used to take loads of reading material. I used to print out all the studies of all the people, and I would read them, and people were absolutely astonished. I knew the detail. I knew how many people were in their sample. I said, how do you know that? I'd sit in the gardens, very often in Africa, with sun-drenched little corners, like in Lusaka or Dar es Salaam, Victoria Falls, very beautiful, in the foothills in Arusha of Tanzania, near Kilimanjaro. And some of my best thinking came when you don't do anything. You're in the middle of a project and you have to pause. Shabbat made me pause. And often the team would come and join me. Some were curious, but always respectful. Some thought I was nuts, but they got it. And we did a lot of planning, and a lot of inspirational ideas came because of Shabbat. I can tell a little story of once I was in the San Raffaele Hospital, which is a Catholic institution in the early days of AIDS. And indeed, one of the other guest speakers was Robert Gallo, and he was the American who, together with Luc Montagnier, well, it was a bit of a toss-up who discovered HIV. And in the end, Francois Barsanusi got the Nobel Prize for it. Somebody who I've shared a stage with as well, a wonderful woman. But anyway, we were sitting there on a Friday night in San Rafael, and I declined the dinner, but I sat there and I had something of my own which I had brought. And they were trying to be very, very respectful. And so they asked me if I would care to say something in Hebrew. Now, my Hebrew ain't that great, but I know how to bargain for somebody in the Carmeli market. But I had what I brought, and it was Friday night, so it was sort of time to bench, really. And I didn't have a siddur with me, but you know, we know it off by heart. And I thought, we'll just go for it. So I thought, if I've started, so I'll finish. And the entire group sat enraptured as I went through the entire benching. And we have we do sing one of the last things to one of the rousing Tannenbaum tunes, and they all did join in to Tannenbaum. But I thought that was quite good for a Yiddish girl on a Friday night to be benching in the San Rafael chapel. So all in all, Shabbat's been a good friend to me. It's helped me, and I think if you stand up for something you believe in, people respect you.
Yes, I think I agree with you. I think that actually when you show how much you enjoy your religion and how much it means to you, people do respect that. And especially, I think in places where they have less, they appreciate it perhaps more. So I mean, I'm sure that being Jewish in that way has enriched your experience in these places.
For sure.
Yeah, very much so. So the flip side of all this is, of course, when you get home, and you and I've been to your house. I'm lucky enough to be to your house, even after you've just returned home. And there's always an amazing Shabbat meal ready. There's always a warm welcome. How do you juggle? How really do you juggle your family with your career? And how have you done that throughout when they were younger and maybe less pliant?
Oh, well, first of all, it's a team effort. Juggling is the word, but it was never, it wasn't an option. That's we all had to work with it. I mean, Avram's ability as a father is sort of legendary. As so is all the boys used to pitch up at Leora's parents' evening. And I remember her saying to them that they couldn't all go in, they had to choose one of them. If in doubt, just take them with, was my philosophy. And I remember going on a trip to Australia and just dealing, Leora was little. So I thought, well, if the kangaroos can do it, so can I. So I sort of popped her in my bag, and she came with. And she enjoyed it. I hope. I took lots of the boys came. We had a conference in Botswana, and it was all going very wrong because I don't know if any of you read Number One Ladies Detective Agency, Andy McCall-Smith's set of books. They were wonderful. In it, Mara Motsui says she wishes she was Sheila Chlu. I don't know if you've seen that sentence, but go back and read it. We were doing our conference with Sheila Chlu. Sheila Chlu was a colourful and very clever lady who currently is the UN Women's Ambassador, I think. Anyway, it was a jolly, she sang Gilbert and Sullivan, and it was a wonderful meeting, but totally disorganized. So, you know, Ari and all my kids just packed their bags, and they took off work or whatever they were doing, and they ran the conference, they ran the meeting. Yeah, no, if in doubt, just take them with. I've taken, Avram's followed me from Delhi to Kaifeng, But it's a nice juggle. It's a nice juggle. And you have to always remember them. I remember the early days of AIDS, we went to, I think it was the second or third big international gathering in Montreal. And it was a big fuss. There was a huge fanfare. And the delegates were invited by the then Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. And we all lined up, and he single-handedly greeted everybody. He shook one by one everyone's hand. It wasn't that many people in those days, to thank the scientific community for what they were doing. And he had a woman with a little basket next to him, and he gave little pins of maple leaves to every delegate in thanks for coming to Canada. And when he got to me, he offered me the pin, and I said it was wonderful to be in Canada, but I'm afraid I couldn't take the pin. And he was taken aback, and he said, "Oh my gosh, what is it that Canada's done that you object to?" I said, "No, nothing. I think it's a lovely country, but I'm afraid I can't take the pin." And he said, "Well, would you mind telling me why so we can try and fix it?" I said, "Yes, you're offering me one pin and I've got 4 children." So he gave me 4 pins. And I bet you if somebody challenged one of my kids, one of them at least would probably have the pin today.
You still got it? I can't see Leora's. She's not holding it up. She's the one who can see it.
No, I wouldn't put my money on Leora. She throws things away. It's conferences. I mean, you organise conferences. You must have spent a lot of your life going to these things and discussing with your colleagues. Is that something that you really enjoy? Is that fruitful, or is it a more taxing part of your work? Well, I think it's quite fascinating because that's the moment of academic exchange. That's the moment where everybody reports on their work and you share the work of others. So I was one of the founders of a global meeting called AIDS Impact, which meets every 2nd year all over the world. And in fact, at one of our first meetings, or was it our first meeting, we invited a group of young people with AIDS into the meeting, which was unusual. And they came in and they were really active participants to tell us about their experience. And as you know, the patient experience has revolutionized how medicine today is practiced. And I do remember very clearly the man who was the leader of the group, his name was John Campbell, and he said, "Oh, our group have got a really good idea. Would you mind if we handed out like a token to all your delegates as a mark?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, what sort of token?" And he said, "We were thinking of a red ribbon." And actually that is where the Red Ribbon campaign started, in our conference in the walls. And we've been to many more and had wonderful engagements with, you know, a lot of the people in the COVID response were actually very good early researchers in AIDS. I mean, I saw Tony Fauci for years. He was one of the good AIDS docs, you know. The leaders of many of the responses to COVID were actually AIDS colleagues.
Is that interesting? We've cut our teeth on one pandemic in order to be able to work on this.
I met, I don't know if anyone remembers Jonas Salk, the man who invented the polio vaccine. He was invited to that Montreal conference. I wonder if he got a pen from Pierre Trudeau, because we wanted to see if he could have some ideas for a vaccine. He had no idea, but he was a lovely man and had a wonderful conversation with him.
Great man. Is there any other amazing people that you've met on your travels and through your work that you share with us?
There's many. They don't remember me, but I remember them. So for example, Ellie McGraw, does anyone remember her from Goodbye Columbus and Love Story? Well, she's in her 70s now and she lives in Santa Fe, and she's a fine lady. And when we did one of our meetings in Santa Fe, she came up to me when we were preparing, and she said to me, "I really want to help. I've got so many friends with AIDS and I believe in what you're doing, but I don't want my name. I want to help. So I said, "That's great. What do you do?" And she said, "Well, arrange flowers. So I said, that's it, that's your job. And on the day, a great big SUV with piled high, all she bought them herself, piled high with flowers. And she pitched up in a pair of jeans and a t-shirt and jacket, looked like $1 million. I dream of looking like that. And nobody knew. She put oasis and beautiful vases, and she was putting flowers in them. And our stage looked fantastic. And nobody knew that the person standing in front, quietly doing the flowers, was none other than Ali McGraw. Spent time with Bill Clinton and Bill Gates.
Wow.
In fact, they're an interesting little couple. I was asked to summarize an element of the conference to the 23,000 delegates. And I remember doing it to the tune of The Sound of Music and talking about the bills are alive instead of the hills are alive, or the sound of money. Bill Gates laughed, Bill Clinton didn't. Many more. Aileen Getty, she was the daughter of the Getty daughter, and she has HIV. She got infected through her husband, who was the son of Elizabeth Taylor. That's how she got infected. And I spent a lot of time with her and shared stages with her. She was a lovely woman, but very early days. And when nobody would do anything with her or come into the room, Elizabeth Taylor rolled up her sleeves and did. And if you know, she set up the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation. They're endless. Richard Gere, met him in Bangkok. He was a great supporter of HIV. He was an extraordinary good-looking man, but he was really, really stupid. And it ended up, because I edit 3 journals, I used to be able to go into the press center, and we kind of had this thing going where he'd make a statement and I'd go like this, and he'd change, and I'd go like this, and he would carry on. He really didn't get the plot, but it didn't matter because he was quite an amazing presence.
Fantastic.
Go on. Nelson Mandela himself.
Wow.
Very humble.
Amazing to have met all these
They don't
people.
remember me. If you put them in here and ask them stories, what they wouldn't say is, oh, well, that Lorraine Sherr, her and her leopard came to visit me. They don't remember me, but I remember them.
Or maybe they remember some of the work that you do. That's great. Kudos. And before, I wanted to actually ask you another pointed question. What has been the greater challenge to you in your professional life? Is it being an Orthodox Jew, or is it being a woman?
Oh, that's an easy one. Not a challenge at all. That's who I am. I'm an Orthodox Jew, and I'm very proud of it. And I make no exceptions for it. And I'm a woman. And I've had to fight many times because of views that other people held about me, but I never held them, about role expectations, about limitations. None of those bothered me. So I'm very happy to be both of them, and they do define a lot of who I am. So no challenge at all.
When you started in your career, was being a woman a difficulty? Did you find that you really had to fight for your corner?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. When I started at university, I was told when I had my first child that I should take time out. And I said, do you ask your male students to do that? And it was actually quite interesting. So then they said, well, if you want to bring the child on campus, it's dangerous because we're not insured. So I then looked in the psychology prospectus to see that there was a course in child development where they did bring children on in terms of the course. And of course, Avram and the entire law department sided with me. We took a case against the university with saying that if it's illegal for me to bring a child onto campus because it's not safe, you can't bring anyone onto campus. And sadly, the university lost their point. And the issue was that they said children could fall down the stairs. So they were duty bound afterwards to put extra railings on every stair in the whole of Warwick University campus. A little victory. If you go and visit Warwick, you'll see there's 3 railings on every staircase on the entire campus. And you can and when I started at the Royal Free, I was cleaning my office and somebody came in and asked where the new Dr. Sherr was. And I said, I'm not sure. He wouldn't be long and they could come back to meet him if they wanted. And they left. Yeah, you know, things have changed though. Things have changed, and life for my daughter will not be as difficult as life for my mother. That's an achievement. I did take it to heart though. So for example, I was the first person who went to UNICEF to show that the AIDS children data wasn't disaggregated by gender. So we didn't know if little girls were different from little boys in terms of susceptibility to the virus, chances of infection and life expectancy and illness trajectory. And until that talk, child data was not disaggregated by gender, and now it is. So, and you know, my work with teen pregnancies on women, and now we've also looked at fathers and fatherhood. So you have to take your gender experiences and bring them into your work.
And do you think that's an advantage, bringing it into your work as a woman going to these villages, and are you able to connect on a different level with the women that you are dealing with?
Yeah. When I was in Umtata and running those groups for women, we had a wonderful moment because the 3 doctors who were escorting me were all male, and they said our woman won't talk to you, and I said they just might. And we sat in a circle and they asked the woman very demanding questions, and the women were cowed and monosyllabic in their answer. And when it came to me, I went around the room and I said, anyone whose first pregnancy, please put your hand up. And a few did. And anyone who's your second pregnancy, put your hand up. And a few more did. And third. And then when it got to 4th child, 1 woman put her hand up. And I pulled my chair up to her and I gave her a hug and I said, we are sisters because I have 4 children. You've got 4. That was it. And we sat down and I said, I want to begin today to talk about mother-in-laws. And I think the doctors left. I can't remember when they left. We stayed there all morning. The woman spoke to me at length. And in fact, they had a very successful rollout of the HIV testing at that clinic. The clinic was built by Kellogg's, and it was basically a wooden hut in the middle of nowhere with no running water. And it was very sad to go there. And after the end of the morning, they offered us tea, and my lovely research assistant said to me, what do we do? I said, you drink it. And they boiled up this kind of grey, reddish looking mud water. And yeah.
You drank it.
I think today it might be very different with the water that I have, but I would drink anything as long as it was boiled. I think I built up a very strong stomach. I don't think I'd advise anyone to do what I did do, but I'm here to tell the tale.
My God, we're very lucky to hear it. We really appreciate it. So then my final question to you is, can you describe one of your proudest moments? What are you most proud of in your career?
Oh, you know, there's very many. And I don't know where my career begins and my personal life ends. The proudest, very hard. Let me give you one which gave me a lot of pride. in all this mayhem of COVID, inspired by Michelle, really, I decided to volunteer at St. Charles Hospital at the vaccination clinic. And when you go there, if you were a fly on the wall, in the front you're met by people who have to check you in, you know, Yoni Sherr, Jasmine Sherr, Ari Sherr, Ilan Sherr, a handful of synths, a couple of gorgies, I think a tapneck, if I'm not mistaken. And then when you go in and you see who's administering all the data, there's Debbie Kelman, there's Danielle Gorgie, I believe Zena Berman might be seen, Josh Tenenblatt pops in and out, Ros Gorgie, Alan Gorgie, lots of Gorgies, Michelle running the place. And I look in there and I think, this is my community. I feel very proud.
That's lovely, Lorraine. That is very lovely. What can I say? I think you are a star in our community. We are very, very blessed to have you as part of it. And as I said, always your smile is what lights up a room. And I think that just to encapsulate the type of way that you have approached your work, your family, your career, and I think that recognition for a life that has been devoted to others. So very well done. Really mazal tov. I don't know if you want to open the forum up to anyone who might want to ask any questions.
That would be lovely.
If anybody does.
Well, can I get one in very quickly, Michelle? And that, I mean,
Nice,
Lorraine, it's Maisie. I'm Debbie's mommy, and I just want to say that I think you're totally amazing. And the most striking is your humility. I've had the privilege of meeting at many lunches and dinners with Deborah, and I mean, you're very impressive. But what subject did you do in university that launched you on this wonderful career? What was it that really pushed you to do all this?
So at university, I did my undergraduate in psychology, my PhD in psychology, and my clinical training as a clinical psychologist. So I was sort of pretty much into understanding how human beings feel. But what I didn't do was run around Shanghai and do a PhD on the Jews of China. So one day, if we have such a meeting, I'd like to be in the audience and hear about you, Maisie, because you know, it's people like you who inspire me.
See, there again, and that's her humility. I'm absolutely nowhere compared to where you are, and you certainly deserve an MBE. And you know what? I'm never going to get one.
Mommy, don't say never. There's always a possibility.
No, well, I'm just sensible. But thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure hearing from you, and Deborah, for asking such wonderful questions. Very good. I'm going to give somebody else a chance.
Thank you. David and Sylvia, I think you wanted to ask something.
Thank you, if I may. Good evening, Lorraine. Lovely to see you, and thank you very much for the presentation. Just a quickie question, please. Can you say, to what extent have you been affected, and to what extent in your work with the latest government cutbacks on overseas aid?
Oh, a shame on all their houses. I've been directly affected. We were awarded a £20 million grant by the ODA to kickstart adolescent achievement across 34 countries in Africa. We were in our second year with a particular remit of being adolescent informed. So we had a group of adolescents driving our project, and we had 48 young career Africans who we were nurturing, and with 4 hours notice the government have taken our money, cut it overnight.
The total grant.
The whole grant they took, it was, you know, just gone. So all that, and you know, our work was being quoted in the UN policy everywhere. We'll continue to work, and it doesn't affect me personally because I'm core funded. You know, I have a job. But yeah, and the shame of it, you know, going to governments that we had wonderful contracts with, going, you know, our abuse program in Sudan, we're running a program for young girls who were victims of abuse, cut. You know, what does the government think they're doing? And it's petty. It's petty. It's the amount would be, if you took 5% of the 5% of the test and trace budget, you wouldn't have to have the OD cut. So it's just poor management and poor politics, very poor politics.
Sorry to hear it.
Yeah.
A sad question, David.
Sorry, it wasn't intended to be.
Yeah, but it's a reality, you know, politics, you know, we do all the work and we're academics, but really politics is where it's all at.
Yeah. Well, I suppose when the cuts came, well, I suppose it went across the board regardless of who was involved or which projects were involved. It wasn't targeted to you or your operation specifically. No,
they've cut all GCRF funding has been cut to all the universities. So the effect of it is on the high level universities are slaughtered. UCL has lost countless studies. Oxford, where my project is based, countless studies. UCL have set up a hardship fund for giving staff notice. You know, Cambridge, Imperial, those four are the worst hit universities in this country.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, it's sad to actually end on that note. I just want to thank you, but to wish you really just that you will continue to go onwards and upwards, and to have success and really make an impact with all that you do, because it definitely is improving so many people's lives around the world. And really kol hakavod to you, and also to your lovely family, because I'm sure that they all play a part in your success.
That's so lovely, and the friends and the people on this call are the strength where I gather. And I will tell you, your earlier question about Shabbat, I will tell you that wherever I was, you know, Arusha, in Nigeria, wherever I was, very often I always brought Shabbat in with a great big WhatsApp message from Benji Steinbach. I would always know it was Shabbat because I'd get and wherever I was, he would be the one telling me what time Shabbat came in and out. And so you know, and I'd come back and there'd be, you know, all these wonderful people, Penina and Ralph, Cherry and Sheldon. You know, how do you manage cooking? Well, you have friends. And Shabbat comes in, you've got 20 minutes to spare, you're on a different time zone, and you have inspirational people, and you know, you look to them for inspiration. You know, look at what Michelle has done and what Roz and Alan are doing. You know, it's quite a community. Very proud to be part of it.
Yes, I think we are really blessed, and I think maybe COVID has taught us that even more, that how blessed we are to have this wonderful community. Yeah, and we're blessed to be part of it with you, Lorraine. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Wish you all a good Shabbos, a Shabbat Shalom, and yes, please God, next award we'll do this again.
Well, I'll keep trying. I will keep trying.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That was
Thank you.
superb. Absolutely superb. And inspiring.
Yeah. Wonderful to hear, everybody. And Mazal Tov on the award.
Thank you.
There's
Thank
a
you,
bit of
Lorraine.
echo, but I've unmuted everybody or given you the possibility of unmuting so that you can say thank you. Sorry about the echo.
We're off. We're on mute. We're off mute.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lorraine.